Not economics, it must be guns. The fact that every Israeli home practically has an Uzi submachine gun and there are no murders there is irrelevant. The fact that nearly every Swiss home has guns in it and there are no murders there is largely irrelevant. The fact that there are very few guns in Rwanda and 100,000 people were just slaughtered by machetes is irrelevant. What is relevant is guns, not human moral accountability. Give you another one. Kids are having kids. What is the liberal response? Condoms. Think about it for a minute. Do you realize? Not kids' values. Not kids' values. Condoms. If only they had access to condoms, we wouldn't have this problem. Or, the other is more sex education. As if the kids don't know that sexual intercourse produces babies. It's amazing how many American kids in this society think talking produces babies. It is really, it is something I was never aware of. They don't know. They need years of sex education to learn that penis and vagina produces children. It's remarkable they didn't know it. This is absurd. We are living, I often say on my radio show, I remember from the Superman comics, the world of Bizarro. I have now instituted on my show the Twilight Zone theme for these moments. And I think for a minute, ladies and gentlemen, what kind of mentality actually believes that kids are having kids because of a lack of condoms or a lack of sex education? That it's not a values problem. Isn't that awesome? And when you try to make it a values issue, you're dead. The Texas school that actually said if you're a cheerleader and get pregnant, we won't let you be a cheerleader. What happened? The ACLU and the National Organization for Women litigated. The school said we have no funds to match them, and they gave up their policy. It was called sexist, but the fact of the matter is any boy who was found to be an impregnator was also kicked off a football team. So it had nothing to do with sexism except for the fact that nature is sexist and who is pregnant is more obvious than who impregnated. It's just a fact of life, which, and by the way, now is litigating against that. The National Organization for Women has taken God to court for having made such a sexist nature. But the remarkable thing was there was an attempt to make values no values. You cannot make stigma on the issue of out-of-wedlock pregnancy. Therefore, whenever there is a values issue, liberals will find money or something else to be the issue. Next part of the battle. We believe, or I believe, and I suspect most of you do, Boy Scouts. As I said on the radio, why don't you atheists form a Boy Scout? You take everything God-fearing people created, you destroy it, you build nothing. The ACLU is like a battering ram in our society. What they do is destroy. They build nothing. No ACLU Boy Scouts, no ACLU Big Brothers, no ACLU schools, nothing. They know how to destroy. Build your own. You don't like our God-based Boy Scouts? Then build your own atheist ones. But you build nothing. You only know how to destroy what people who actually take God seriously have built. That's my j'accuse to liberals. Why don't you build something for a change? It's easy to destroy. We learned 10 seconds in Los Angeles to destroy freeways built over years. They're like it's a liberal earthquake in America. The liberal believes in groups. The rest of us believe in the individual and the nation. Groupthink has taken over in America. You know, the joke is I still think I'm a liberal, but liberalism has become so radicalized that, of course, I'm no longer a liberal in today's parlance. But I was raised that the ideal was to see people first and their group second. I was taught that in fact, is what makes America different from every nation in the history of the world. That who your parents are and where you come from is secondary, and who you are, based on what you do, that's primary. I don't give a damn if you're a black. I mean, I tell this to black callers, and I tell you, it is really remarkable. Say, I want to tell you something. For you, that is to the black callers who disagree with me, and immense number agree with me. But for those who disagree, I want you to know something. For you, being black is absolutely defining. But I've got to tell you something. For most of us who are not you, it isn't. You're defined by you, to me, not by your color. That may be the most important thing in your life, but it's not the most important thing in my life when I see you. I know that this is a revelation to you, but it's the truth, and I speak on behalf of tens of millions of others. But in America today, to see yourself first as a woman, first as poor, first as black, first as Hispanic, that's considered progressive. To be first a human, that's called conservative. Isn't that remarkable? The usurping of language and how it has worked? Groups don't interest me, ladies and gentlemen, but groups interest our opponents in the culture war. I realized it today, reading today's New York Times, when I saw the article that they're probably no longer going to make a lot of the devices needed for heart valves and lung valves and all of that stuff because they're afraid of litigation. And I remembered that the second largest contributor to the Democratic Party was the National Trial Lawyers Association. And that the last Republican government actually tried to work on litigation. But is that sexy? That's not sexy to the American public. Dan Quayle had a big task force to work on litigation control. Now, when Americans can't get that thing for their lung and their heart, they might ask which party is responsible for that. Well, it's the one that answers interests first and asks what's best for the country second. We don't ask what's best for the country anymore. What's best for my group? Who asks that? It's terrible. What's best for educators? What's best for lawyers? What's best for blacks? What's best for women? And of course, only a handful answer those questions. But the question, isn't it a quaint one? It's almost, I guess, silly. What's actually better for the country? See? That's a different way of asking things. But when you groupize it, you get very different answers. Two more, and then I will open up for your comments. The Democrats and liberals are big on compassion. And I have a word to say about compassion, because I am big on compassion too, and I figured, how do they have more compassion than I? I know how much I cry for people who suffer. So I'm trying to figure out, why do they have more compassion? Then I realized, they want government to have compassion. And I realized that compassion should be much more in the realm of the micro than the macro. People must show compassion, governments must show justice. The task of government is to be just, not to be compassionate. Because when you're compassionate on the macro level, you end up mean to somebody else. Classic example I just gave on litigation. Oh, we're going to be compassionate to women who've had breast implants. So we're going to scare the living daylights out of them, even though there was no reason for them to be scared, it now turns out, as with so many of the other scares. But we're going to be very compassionate and sue the living daylights out of breast implant makers. Of course, the result is that now there is going to be much less manufacturing of any of the synthetic material for anything else, like your heart or your lung. Read it, front page today's New York Times. So by being compassionate to a handful of women who were very unhappy with their breast implant, the government ends up mean to a far larger number of people who will need all of these things that these companies make. But after all, if it's Dow Chemical versus a woman whose breasts are hurting, what should government favor? Isn't it obvious? Compassion, of course, goes to her. Big, bad Dow Chemical versus poor woman with hurting breasts. The trouble is government can't do that. Individuals must do that. Government must be fair, not compassionate. Because if it is compassionate, it ends up being mean to somebody else. Government is too large to be compassionate. That's what it took me years to figure out, because God, they really have cornered the market on compassion. That's not government's task.